How's it going, everybody? This is Aaron the Pedantic, and today we're going to discuss something that I actually wrote a blog post about, but I know that not everybody reads blog posts. So if you want to read the blog post, it's going to be a lot more succinct than what this is. But instead of just reading the blog post to you, what I'm going to do is just kind of paraphrase it more or less. What inspired it? Well, I guess what is it about? The whole topic of it is, what exactly does a level 1 fighter represent? And that raises the question, why bother asking? Why not just let anybody determine what that means based on what their personal feelings for it are with the world that they're creating and all that kind of stuff, and blah 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 blah. I get why people have the inclination to want to dismiss the concept, but in my case, there is both a desire to try and extrapolate as much information from the core books as I can and see, what does it mean? What kind of world does it suggest? And what does it say about the characters that we're creating? And also, I guess there's part of me that's something of a purist at heart. I don't know. But in any case, it is a topic of interest to me, and it is worthy of discussion, debate, even, well, I guess debate, not fighting. But the whole thing to me is a very interesting question. So where am I pulling my information from? Well, I'm pulling it from first edition AD&D, specifically because first edition AD&D has a ton of information, both explicit and implicit, that you can pull from all of these little features, all these little things. Basically, all of this information that has been compiled by Gary Gygax is all pointing in the direction of something. Now, was it all intentional? Was it a great master plan? Is it calculated so precisely so as to create a very specific world? Maybe not. Maybe not. But at the same time, what if it is? That's kind of a sentiment that I saw written by Chris Kutalik, which I'm going to get to that later. Coincidentally, I wrote this blog post and someone said, you should read these blog posts by him. And I did. And I was like, wow, that's way better than what I had. But it's kind of in the same vein. Anyway, I'll get back to that later. I'm sorry for the dilly-dallying. I keep jumping around. So I think it's an important question to ask. So the fighter, whenever we're talking about the fighter in first edition AD&D, how old are they? First off, they are between 16 and 19 for humans. If you use the chart, it does say that it can be customized specific to your milieu, because that is one of Gygax's favorite words. And the important thing to note is that straight across down the board, with all of the humans, the demi-humans, they're all going to be in the young adult range for all of your fighters. So a lot of people see this and they have this inclination that means that your fighter is really not going to know very much as far as the ways of the world and all that kind of stuff. I feel like I can understand where they're coming from. However, I think that we really have to get into the perspective of people that are not living in the 21st century. It's a little different in this period of time, that in this fantasy world where you have people constantly embroiled in war against chaos and all this kind of stuff. You have a greater need of people getting into conflicts all the time. And, you can't really just let them blossom as much as you can nowadays. You just don't have quite the same luxury. So what that means is that you're going to have people that are conscripted at younger ages, people that are, let's say, veterans at a younger age. And so why do I use that word in particular? Well, it's because that is the level 1 title for fighters in AD&D first edition. You are a veteran. Now, we could use that information, extrapolate what do this title at this level, this title at this level, that kind of thing, and we could justify all kinds of stuff. And there's there is truth in the idea that a lot of the title business is just weird. But at the same time, I have noticed that there seems to be some kind of uniformity in the first level and the name levels as far as how they seem to represent certain things in the world that we can derive from various mechanics and stuff like that. So for this circumstance, why is veteran important? Well, it implies that the player character has already been through some serious conflicts before. And we could say they are specifically somebody who was conscripted as a soldier for their liege lord, and that's it. But I would say there's room for a little bit more than that. I actually made a little chart on my blog entry, just a little 2d6 chart, where there are not only these conscripted soldiers, but there's also room for brigands and bandits and pirates and even some dishonored squires, very rarely, and dishonored paladins, dishonored rangers, people that didn't make the cut. And I think that that's an interesting way to go. We'll get more into that thing later. But really the important thing is that they're not somebody who's just like fresh off the farm. The reason that you can know this for a fact is because there's already a type of character for that. It's called normal human and normal man. It is a step below in virtually every category. Whenever you look in the monster manual, what do you see? You see people that are bandits, soldiers, dervishes, all kinds of stuff. Even the demi-humans, you got your gnomes, your dwarves, all this stuff. At most, they are a D6 plus 1 hit die. Not an entire D10 up to a D10 plus 4 like your fighter can be. Not even close. What about their THAC0? The THAC0 is better for the fighter. The first level 1 fighter is a step up on the ladder from all of these level 0s. And really everybody else too. Everybody else too. Although it's pretty easy to miss because you do have that repeating 20 and you actually start on the bottom one, whereas everybody else starts on like the second one. Now, there is a note here. You're a step above all these people except for paladins and rangers. That should be kind of obvious, but I felt like it's worth clarifying because some people will probably point it out. Your weapon proficiencies, you get more of them than anybody else. Well, we don't really have this weapon proficiency thing as something that we denote for monsters or anything like that. No, but we pretty much can surmise what exactly their weapon proficiencies are by what they're carrying. And typically your enemies are carrying maybe 1 or 2 weapons at the most, and that's about it. Your fighter is going to have 4. They're going to have 4 different things that they can carry, that they can use. And not only can they use those, but they can actually use things that they're not proficient with better than other people can use things that they're not proficient with. That speaks to something. It speaks to a particular kind of martial training. And I'm sorry, I know I'm drilling this in, but I think it's an important point because it is raised quite often. You also have exceptional strength. So exceptional strength as a possibility. It's something that sets the fighter apart, obviously. Now, does that mean that that's pivotal to being a fighter? Not necessarily, because that's actually not the most common outcome for character creation. So it's kind of negligible, but I just feel like it's worth saying because I know somebody else is going to bring it up and I'm just addressing those before they happen. So you can assume that they have already been through some kind of service, either in a military capacity, in some kind of vagabond, just going around doing crime, whatever. So some of those kinds of capacities, you can assume that they have already done that. They've got a little bit of world experience. They've maybe saved up a little bit of money left over from that. This is one reason why, as an additional thing, I would definitely consider giving fighters some very basic equipment along with their money instead of just the money. That's just me. But what can we derive from that? The fact that they do have this experience. Well, it means that they have some connections. There's some implied connections there that they would have in the world. This training does not come out of nowhere. And we're going to talk about later that there is a very, very, very distinct positioning of fighters in the world. They are all over the place. And I'm not talking about just like level 1 fighters. I mean, they are very common. But I'm talking about level 8 fighters. They are quite plentiful in the world, as you can definitely find in various places. And because of that, this is great. This is great news for those of you that are trying to use, the books as they're written, as I was going to say as intended. I know that that's a very dubious statement that evokes a lot of criticism. But whenever we're talking about training rules, for instance, people are wondering, do I know any high-level fighters? The answer should be yes, absolutely, because high-level fighters are just people that are really good at fighting in your local area. Your lords are high-level fighters. Their lieutenants, the people that work under them, are higher level fighters than you. That's for darn sure. They are all over the place. And by virtue of you committing time in one service or another, that means that you're going to know them. There is the question of, are they local? And that's going to depend. For instance, in my Greyhawk game, we have a lot of characters that they are from various regions, and they have come to Hamlet, or they've come to Dark Shelf in particular for a specific mission. And so they're patrons that they're familiar with, the people that could potentially train them and give them information and quests and all that kind of stuff, they may not be around. That's just facts. Maybe a good reason whenever you make your character to try and make them a local whenever you're starting out. Just a little little tidbit there. So that is a thing. Now, whenever I'm talking about how common are they, the way that you can tell this, how can you tell this? You can actually tell how common they are overall just from a few different sources. Well, really, primarily, it's going to be in the random encounters. And so this is going to be in the appendix, I think it's Appendix C. And it's going to be in the monster manual under the sections for men, basically. Because what you're going to have is that for every 20 of this, which is like maybe bandits or something like that, you're going to have a level 3 or 4 fighter who's in charge of them. This is off the top of my head, so don't quote me exact verbatim. This is approximately correct. But there is, at the very least, whenever you have bandits, you have a level 9 fighter or something to that effect, which is basically a lord, lord level fighter going around running these shows, commanding bands of bandits, basically. And so that says some pretty incredible things about these worlds. Well, how often do we come upon them? Well, then you can look at your random encounter chart to see how often do you come across bandits. And, when you come across bandits, they're going to have a high level leader. That's just something that is there. Whenever you are talking about patrols are, again, something that is built into the system. Whenever you're going through inhabited lands, you're going to encounter patrols. And guess what patrols are? Patrols are like super decked out dudes, high level fighters, with war horses and plate mail and all kinds of crazy stuff. They are ready to lay down some serious hurt. So really, even though you're definitely a step above the average as a level 1 fighter, you are still just a little tiny peasant in some capacities. Peasant's the wrong word. You are still a weakling compared to the others that you see out there in the wilderness. And there is a lot to go from there. So not only do you have the patrols, but you also have the strongholds. You have the fact that every 1 in 20 encounters in the wilderness is going to be a stronghold, and a good decent chunk of change of those are going to belong to character types. And whenever you look at character types, 44% of the character type ones are going to be fighters. I know that's a lot of ifs, and all that kind of stuff. But whenever we're really starting to extrapolate all this into what would this look like in the world, what it means is that there are a heck of a lot of castles that are currently being run by fighters of 9th level or higher. It's pretty crazy. You've got a whole lot of them. And then, now this is outside of the core book, so forgive me for this. But whenever you look in the Greyhawk Gazetteer, you can see that there are a ton of leaders out there that are 17th level, 18th level, 19th level, that kind of stuff. They are incredibly powerful fighters. And those are the leaders of nations. So there's a lot that we can pull from all this kind of stuff just to really figure out what is the place of a fighter in this world that these rules are creating. Now, the reason I brought up Chris Kutalik's blog post is because at this point, now that I've written I've written my blog post and then I read his blog posts, which I'm going to put a link in the description. And now that I'm making this video, I have undoubtedly been tainted by the greatness that was his extrapolation of even more of these facts put into greater detail. I completely forgot to mention the stronghold thing. I'll get to that. But what he did was he took even more of this and he figured out with the population density and the way that the hex map was created, the Darlene maps and how much farmland is covered and all this kind of stuff. What he basically the conclusion he came to was that Greyhawk is this very sparse landscape. There is just a ton of empty area, just full of monsters and people fighting, bandits, berserkers, all this kind of stuff is out there. And this explains why we have all of these magical artifacts just sitting around in these decrepit ruins. All of these, speaking of, when it comes to ruins, I mentioned the places that were occupied. I didn't mention the places that were unoccupied, which is also a very sizable number. There are many strongholds out there that are going to, actually, most of the strongholds out there aren't going to be held by anyone. They're just going to be either inhabited by a monster or something of that nature, or just completely empty. This is in many ways a ruined world, the way that it is expressed. And so that explains the need for these fighters, all of these fighters out here trying to survive out in the wilds, outside of civilization. And civilization itself is really kind of fallen in a lot of ways, and it's trying to rebuild itself, and it needs people to be these valiant warriors to push back the forces of chaos, to clear lands and grow the human civilization. And that is where these fighters come in. That is also where the clerics come in, magic users to an extent. But more than anything, I would say your fighters, because they are the ones that become the lords of the lands. They are the ones that get to have these grand castles with many followers. And even though the cleric gets a really sweet deal with all that stuff because of their religious ties, the fighter is the one that seems to be able to profit the most from all of this kind of stuff, gold-wise. And of course, the whole time they are not bound by the strict things that clerics are. So they get the sweeter end of the deal in that capacity too. They can be completely morally neutral. They can be just money grubbing, adventurers for the most part. And then you have the question of what happens whenever you get to be a more powerful fighter. Well, I mean, you get to be a killing machine. There's really no doubt there. You just cut through swaths of enemies without very much difficulty. But once you get to the 9th level, at that point, you have the opportunity to carve out a section of wilderness with a stronghold that is built, protect it from any kinds of monsters coming in and encroaching on your land, establish a freehold where all of these people can move in. You can get all these followers and you can start collecting taxes, and the domain game begins. And it's awesome. So that is what ends up happening. There is the question at that point. Now that you are a level 9 retired, perhaps name level fighter, after you've cleared your lands, you've laid down your freehold, you have all this stuff going on. What next? Well, you have some options. You can retire, and you can just run your lands as you become a patron to the next generation of fighters and all of the other adventurers. That is option 1. Option 2 is to rule this land, often from afar, with a steward handling your day-to-days while you continue your adventures and just go on bigger and better things. So, all in all, incredibly exciting stuff. Fighters are awesome. To anybody saying that they are not awesome, they are a liar. I didn't even touch on all of the magic items that are only accessible to fighters, or specifically there's a few potions, I think, but there are some that are only for fighters. The magic sword department has been overtaken in first edition. In original Dungeons and Dragons, you kind of had the best of the world of magic weapons, because as a fighter you were the only ones able to use magic swords, but the thief has unfortunately taken that from us. So has the ranger and the paladin. In any case, all kinds of interesting stuff. I love it. I love looking into these things. I plan on doing this concept for the other classes as well. Let me know if you are interested in that, and I will keep doing it. And sorry for the ramble. Check out the blog post if you want something a little bit more direct. And definitely check out Chris Kutalik's blog posts on the AD&D apocalypse, because it is fascinating. Very, very cool stuff. Y'all take it easy. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Peace out.